Can we bring back manufacturing without tariffs?
No.
Hello, I'm Linda Vu. I have over a decade experience in political and economic policy organizing. Let's start digging into the American system of economics, what President Trump's reviving, and tariffs. Stop arguing tariffs. I can guarantee you've not thought of tariffs quite like this. Let's dig in with the first interview.
I'm interviewing Mindy Pechenuk today, who is with Promethean Action and also a mayoral candidate here in Oakland, California, and asking her some questions on the American system and Trump's tariffs. Mindy, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. As Linda said, I'm Mindy Pechenuk, and I am currently running for mayor of Oakland, California in the November 2026 election. And I am probably the only candidate that is running or going to run that actually understands the American system, that supports directly working with President Trump, and that includes tariffs and bringing back industry, manufacturing, and making our nation, and I hope to make Oakland, a sovereign place again for future generations and families to live.
Mindy is an expert and have been studying the American system for 50 years. When I bring this up to students on college campuses or in general, most have never heard of such names as Henry Carey, as McKinley's tariffs. Now, when you even bring up, the name mention of tariffs, Trump's tariffs, people kind of freak out over it. Yeah, give everyone a sense of the American system.
Okay, great. Love to. I know a lot of people confuse tariffs with taxes. Mm-hmm. Tariff is not a tax. In fact, in the history of it, you have to go back to Alexander Hamilton. Because Hamilton, George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, they understood the principles that were created in the image of God. And God gave to man something very special, which is a creative mind, to develop, to discover the principles of the universe, and to develop future generations to continue continuously in that development. And that defines a sovereign nation. And they understood that if you're going to have a sovereign nation, you have to have production, manufacturing, scientific discoveries, culture in your country, that you could not be dependent on every other country to supply everything that you need. So the idea of a tariff was developed. It was a beautiful concept, and it worked. And it worked up until McKinley, President McKinley, who unfortunately was assassinated in 1901 because of what he was doing in making, again, the nation sovereign, developing tariffs. In fact, in those days, you didn't have income tax because you had tariffs, which made the country completely self-sufficient in manufacturing, in industry, in science. We were growing, we were leading the world. Everybody wanted the American system, as opposed to what? The British system. And the British system of free trade and of destroying industrialization, destroying the culture. Now, what do you do when you destroy the culture? What do you destroy? Science.
Since the 70s, is the globalization system, is that a British system? Is that?
Thank you for that. Yes, it is. Globalization today is the British system. And what does it do to human beings? Because you always have to go to the human question. You're not just manufacturing to have more manufactured things. Mm-hmm. You're manufacturing industry, global developments in great new breakthroughs in energy, for example. And you have these because that's what makes us human. That's what makes us in the image of God. I don't think God would have bothered to have created us with a human creative mind. I love my dog that's over there rolling around, but he can't develop anything except making me happy. But the universe needs a little bit more than that. And so that's why you have these constant developments. And the British globalization central banking system of today is and has been destructive, which is why the American system economists of our time, our lifetime, I'm proud to say I'll be 75 this year, so my lifetime has spanned a few generations. And you look at somebody like Lyndon LaRouche, who was, I say was because he is now deceased, an American system economist. You look at President Donald Trump and what he's doing today, where he said he's going to rebuild the Republican Party of the working class. And it's for all people. This is not about Republican or Democrat or NPP independent. It's about, again, bringing sovereignty back to our country after what? Since about 1970, when we started taking our industries and taking them overseas to China.
And let's move on to Trump and tariffs. Where are we with Trump and tariffs, and what are the developments now with Trump and tariffs and certain American industries today?
With Trump's tariffs on steel coming into the country, he has now the U.S. steel production since what, a year ago, is now outproducing Japan. When some steel, outproducing Japan. And there was a recent true story about one of these steel companies in the United States. They were down to 1 hour work a week because of no tariffs, because the country was being flooded with steel from Japan and other countries. And since Trump's tariffs, they're now up to 2 or 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week. They got surplus. People are coming to them for, products. That is a turnaround, and it'll happen across the board. Some industries, it may take longer because it's, a process of rebuilding, process of reorganizing. And I just want to say one last thing on this tariff question to the manufacturing. What Trump has also done, which most people don't know, that these tariffs, if say Japan came into the United States, and which is true, they did, to work with U.S. Steel. And if you are working with an American company and you're producing in the United States, you don't have a tariff because you're producing it in the United States. And so this is why it's not a tax. Tariffs are not a tax. Taxes are completely different than a tariff. In fact,
tariffs are not a tax, and tariffs are not used as contrast
to what we hear in the media. It's not used. Trump isn't using it as a punishment tool.
Absolutely true. It's not a punishment. In fact, it's bringing America back. Most people today are probably younger, and even confuses some older people because of the fake news in the media, which is lying about tariffs. But, it's almost strange to have to say we need manufacturing in the country. When I was young in 1950s, that wasn't even an issue. Manufacturing everywhere, production, small businesses. My father ran a fruit and vegetable store. It was just normal. And then after the assassination of Kennedy, which was done by the globalizers, in order to reverse the direction of the country, because Kennedy was he had a unique tax policy, which was very good, which was a good tax policy. If you wanted to rebuild your industry with the most developed and new technology, you would get a tax credit to get rid of your old equipment and bring in the new modern developments into your factory to make you more productive. Kennedy had developed the space program, just like President Trump is doing today with Artemis 2, and we finally went back to the moon. That spurs on optimism about the human creative mind.
Okay, so just like the tariffs, that would be another tool in the toolbox of the American system.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a necessary tool because of how we totally destroyed our industry.
Can we bring back manufacturing today without tariffs?
No.
Why?
Because since 1970s, we've systematically taken down our industries. And I can tell you a couple quick personal stories. In the 1980s, I was in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. And you know what they did? They tore down the steel mills, shipped everything over to other countries. Once you start taking down your industry, it takes a long time to rebuild. And that's what President Trump has done to actually put tariffs on everything. And you notice he's flexible. He'll put the tariff, he'll pull back the tariff, he'll escalate with the tariff. Because countries were charging us tariffs. We were paying on our goods going to other countries, we were paying very high tariffs.
prices are high right now, and there are some job dislocation. Why is that?
Well, because when the country has been decimated since the 1970s, you're talking decades of shutting down industry, shutting down manufacturing, literally destroying cities. And in many of these cities, which we used to be blooming in, and then they took it all out, what happened? The cities, the workers, the people in the community became drug addicts because there was no life. There was nothing good. And so when you're rebuilding from such destruction, and you're not just talking 1 or 2 years, you're talking about building new plants.
We're feeling that because of the last 4 or 5 decades of the takedown of the high-paying skilled labor. Is that
that's absolutely right, Linda. It takes a while to rebuild. You know, and so it's a little bit of a sacrifice in some areas. I mean, look, in World War II, people sacrificed. They had rations. You know, the idea that everything is going to get better, like an overnight, hamburger at a fast food place. Real life isn't like that.
Yeah.
It takes a while to rebuild. Some prices have come down. Some may not yet come down. But with time, it will pay off.
There's a message to the American people about Trump's tariff. The directionality is that it's a long game. It's a long view that we have to change in what we're committed to, is to know that this is temporary and that what is shifting is the system of things, is a long-term system, is what Trump is changing.
Absolutely correct. And people have to realize the long term. People realizing they're doing something for future generations.
So the American system, and just to get this more into the American vernacular again, the American system is about having that one breadwinner in a family that can take care of a family of 5 or 6.
No, that's exactly right, which is the way it was in the 1950s and through the early 60s. One person works, can raise a family of 5, 6 kids, 4, one person stays home, helps the children. And once we stop that process of caring about life and says that, I can get it cheap if it's made in somewhere else. Well, cheap is not the American system.
I thought what you brought up originally with how you introduce all of us with the American system is fascinating. The American system has everything to do with the image of man made in the Creator. And that is actually very much centralized in the Constitution. That the American system of economics, in terms of economy, has nothing to do with, our pursuit of making lots of money, but in how we pursue wealth in this country. It has everything to do with how we look at this question of human beings.
Well, yes, and that's why the most important wealth of our nation is in the minds of our children. To me, that is where the wealth is. And if you're not developing your children to know that's what makes them in the image of God, that creative discovery, where you're discovering the discoveries of people who came past so you can make a better discovery today. And that's why we have to create a situation where our children are brought up and educated in these ideas. And a nation today that has a good percentage of children who can't read above a second grade level, how are they going to advance new discoveries? How are they going to advance new technologies? Here we are on the verge of an AI age, a nuclear age, a fusion age, and we have children that can't even put together whole sentences, let alone read a book, let alone make a discovery themselves. And so I think one of the ways of thinking about the American system of economics, like Linda, you were referring to earlier, the other tools in the toolbox, is in fact the education of our children. And that's why it's been so destroyed by the globalists, by the British Empire, by their friends who hate the American system. They're not misinformed. They know what the American system is. They've been fighting us ever since the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and even before. So it's so important that people today get totally involved, develop their understanding of these things, and you won't find yourself taxed to death. And I just want to conclude with one short thing from here in Oakland. Oakland's a perfect example in the small of what needs to be done, because Oakland once was a great industrial city. You had Chevrolet, you had Del Monte Foods, you had everything you could imagine. And now you have drugs, guns, one of the worst crime cities, kids who can't read. But one thing they're doing in Oakland is they're raising our taxes. They're now going to put another parcel tax, and they have another tax. And a lot of these taxes are done in deals with some of the unions. I'm not anti-union, so I'm not saying that. But the SEIU, the Firemen's Union here in Oakland, are cutting a deal to get money out of the taxes rather than bringing back the industry, the manufacturing, and the education. And Trump's tariffs are going to help Oakland, because it's going to give a basis for us to bring these industries, bring AI companies, whatever it may be, back into the city and make it productive again. And so, but one thing I'll just say to end with is, without tariffs, without Trump having taken that first step, which has given him tremendous leverage, everybody should know that is the American way. And in fact, President Trump, as he's done tariffs, he's reduced taxes. No tax on tip, no tax on retirement, Social Security, no tax on overtime. So he's diminishing the taxes as is increasing the wealth of our country through the real creative process.
Okay. Thank you, Mindy Pechenuk. All right, folks. This is goodbye. We'll see you again from Oakland, California. And for those who are in Oakland, you can vote for Mindy come November.
And check out my website, electmindy.com. It's very simple. electmindy.com. Go there and check it out.
Thank you, and tune in and subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.